let's talk about solar panels real quick.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I like the solar panel stuff.
I mean, I got solar panels on my house. I mean,
Yeah.
I put them up and just to play with them. So, and there's different types. Well, we'll group them into just a few categories. Where there's the monocrystalline types, which is mainly of silicon, but they're the most efficient ones out there. They have about 14, a little more than between 14 and 15% efficiency, which doesn't sound like much, but that's the best. That's the best out there right now. But they're more expensive. The ones that are cheaper to make are polycrystalline ones that you also use silicon, but a little cheaper to make. They're a little less efficient, maybe 13, 14%, which isn't bad, Then you have the category what we call thin film. There's a lot of those as well. There's the amorphous silicone. There's the CIGS, which is called
copper, indium, gallium, and selenide.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then there's also cadmium, telluride.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of great thin film ones out there. What's good about the thin film solar panels is that they are a little less to manufacture. They don't have all those complex materials like the monocrystalline ones do. So they're a little better in production, a little better for the environment overall, I would say.
Because they have less greenhouse gas emissions, right?
Right, because they're a little less complex to produce. So as far as raw materials go, so that's a wonderful thing. They're not as efficient though. They're way down there. They're below 10%. Some of them go down to 6%. But they range from 6 up to 12%. So it depends on what type of thin film. They may last from 15 to 17 years. So how do you compare all these things? There's a greenhouse gas emission to all of them because if you buy a polycrystalline versus a thin film one, you have to buy a little more thin film ones to make up the amount of power usage you would have. So there's a cost there in greenhouse gases because you're buying more of them, right? You have to add a supplement with it because they're not as efficient.
I had a question. We were talking about this, but if you compare like all the different thin film photovoltaic systems, such as the CIGS, the copper, indium, gallium, selenide, and then the amorphous silicon, and then the cadmium telluride to the crystalline ones.
Yeah, monocrystalline.
Yeah, Paul, what do you think would be our best solution to go with? Because most of our solar panels are the mono and polycrystalline ones produced in China, and so they're producing them there. I mean, would we be better off producing these thin film ones here in the United States when we compare like the things such as the carbon dioxide emissions and the cost of making them? I mean, what do you think?
I think you're on the right track. Okay, so in looking into that, so the thin film ones, the CIGS and the cadmium telluride, all those for their life cycle assessment in grams of CO2 production per kilowatt hour, they're about overall at least 30% less. It could be, and in some cases they're more. It could be it's 50% less for some of the monocrystalline. You think of on the high ends, let's say a monocrystalline one does 300. You could get a thin film one down to say between 150 and 200. And again in a realistic sense, what we're calling a realistic number. So, but the companies will say 20 to 30. Which is anyway. So also there's a cost. They're cheaper to make. Mm-hmm. So they're actually less expensive. You have to buy more of them, but still overall the cost per watt is still less than a monocrystalline panel and a polycrystalline panel. So overall it's great. The problem is that their life cycle is about 15 to 17 years. It's less than a monocrystalline one. However, there is some cost made up because they are cheaper. You buy more, you have to place it. Still, their CO2 emissions over their life cycle is still less, even factoring all that in. Second of all, with their costs, they have an efficiency that's a little bit better. So if as you know, and especially out here in Arizona, I have polycrystalline panels right now, but when it gets really hot, like 100, which it does quite a bit over 105, sometimes they lose efficiency, 15%. Boom, they're down, and so you have to take that into consideration.
But the thin films don't. They're not.
They don't. Not as much. They're more durable that way. Plus, when it's cloudy out, and when the angles of the sun aren't so great, the thin film ones perform a little better as well. So you get a little bit. So overall, when you're talking about some of the inefficiencies that go throughout the day for your for your solar panels, the performance overall averages out maybe a little better with the thin film ones because they're a little more robust in those harsher environments, both cloudy and heat. So.
Well, I will say that I was watching the Department of Energy video like a year or two ago from the new administration that was coming out, and they are kind of interested in continuing the practice of producing the cadmium telluride thin film photovoltaic cells. And they're also looking into perovskite. I think they were looking into one company on the East Coast that was going to make those. The point being is that we believe that if we kind of made these thin film ones, or like 3 or 4 different variations of the solar panels, they would be better for the environment and than like producing the poly and monocrystalline silicon ones.
Yeah, I would think a tech company would do really well in concentrating on producing thin film solar panels in whatever chemistry you want to make it, whatever. But I think that right here in the USA, that's what we recommend. I guess that would be a good way to go forward. Is maybe if remember we talked about the Chip and Science Act.
Oh yeah, we're talking. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you brought that.
Along with that, since they're emphasizing the building of microprocessors in the United States, they could translate some of that into producing thin film, solar panels right here in the USA. I think would be a good thing where we could probably try to compete with some of the overseas production of the not so good for the environment, or not, they're not bad, but not as good for the environment, the monocrystalline and polycrystalline ones. So that's sort of our recommendation. I believe that would be a great thing to emphasize if we were in charge, right? All right. So until next time, we're the Climate Change Brothers, and talking about agriculture and energy and engineering and all things
related to climate change.
Climate change. So until next time, we thank you, and